From Detroit's Cass Corridor, it's the Metro on WDET. I'm Tia Graham.
And I'm Robyn Vincent. Today on the show, we'll track the pressure points, immigration enforcement, and the question of whether a city can create real boundaries from federal agents.
We'll also look at the state of democracy closest to home, where engagement is thinning out even as local government still has to function.
Then in hour two, we shift from policy to survival and to prevention.
We'll hear from a Detroit author whose new book speaks directly to boys trying to navigate life outside of crime and what it means to offer guidance before the system shows up.
And we'll stay in culture, looking at what's coming up in the city's art scene and why that public life matters in a moment when so many people feel isolated.
2 hours of original local programming about how policy hits the streets and what people build to keep others from falling through the cracks. This is the Metro.
We begin with immigration enforcement and the questions it's raising about civil and human rights. Under President Trump's second term, immigration enforcement has become more dangerous and more visible. Detention has expanded rapidly. And last year was the deadliest year in more than 2 decades for deaths in ICE custody. Federal records show people have continued to die in custody in the opening days of this year. There have also been multiple fatal shootings at the hands of on- and off-duty ICE agents in recent months. In Minneapolis, an ICE agent shot and killed Renee Nicole Good. That killing prompted lawsuits from Minnesota and its largest cities. Other people have also been killed by ICE agents, including Silvadio Villegas Gonzalez near Chicago and Keith Porter Jr. in California. Here in Detroit, City Councilmember Gabriela Santiago-Romero is pushing the city to act. She represents Southwest Detroit and chairs the City Council's Public Health and Safety Committee. She's asking whether Detroit can legally limit ICE activity on city property and in sensitive places like schools and hospitals. Councilmember Santiago-Romero, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
So before we talk about the policy you're working on pertaining to ICE, I want to start with your reaction to the killing of Renee Nicole Good in Minneapolis. And again, I want to note she's not the only person killed by an ICE agent in recent months. What went through your mind as you watched this case become a national flashpoint?
For me, it is now very clear as day how dangerous ICE is, how lawless they are, and how they are committing crimes. This is a compounding process of just seeing deaths by ICE that are on duty or off duty, as you mentioned, and just knowing what is happening in detention centers to families, to people that are being picked up, and also just what citizens are also going through. They are picking up citizens, they are killing Americans. I think right now it is clear as day that we need to act.
Now, the killing of Renee Nicole Good has come amid rising detention numbers and the deadliest year in more than 2 decades for deaths in ICE custody. You've mentioned that this moment feels very urgent in terms of the need to act. I'm wondering how these facts change how urgent this has felt to you as a local lawmaker. Again, that there are these rising detention numbers and that we have just seen the deadliest year in more than 2 decades for ICE deaths in custody.
I will say, honestly, residents in District 6 would have had me block ICE last year. As soon as Trump got reelected, they wanted the city to do something. And at that point, we are all abiding by the law, so we think, right? And we're going to do what we have to do because we are following leadership from the top. But it's been a year. It has been dangerous. It has been deadly. It is clear that none of us are safe. And now the urgency is very unfortunate because it has taken the deaths of American citizens for people to say, okay, hold on, something's not right. We already knew something wasn't right. Undocumented immigrants, families from mixed statuses, we already knew that we were in danger, but now it's very clear. And I think for me, this now gives me the momentum that I need to be able to say we need to act. And we should have acted last year, but now it's very clear, right? And I think that's the urgency. And the urgency, too, isn't just for residents in District 6. Over the past week, we have received, the clerk's office has received over 100 public comments that have just been submitted through email or through calls to their office. My office alone has received calls from residents outside of my district, even outside of Detroit. And yesterday was Tuesday, we had about 100 other people call in asking the city to do something. And some of the folks, again, were not Detroit residents. I think everyone is scared. I think people, no matter where they are scared because we're seeing ICE in Flint, in Grand Rapids. And I believe that we're looking at Detroit to see if we can do something here because I believe that other people want to replicate this. Everyone is scared right now.
I want to talk about exactly what you're trying to do, but first I want to acknowledge that hundreds of public comments is pretty remarkable in terms of public engagement. Can you talk a little bit about what some of those comments have said?
They are a mix of gratitude. They are grateful that we're looking to see if there is a solution that we can put forward. And it's one of pleading because they are scared. They are worried, and many people see agents that are not properly that aren't showing their names, the agency that they're with. They're in unmarked vehicles. So it's also about just making sure. I think residents want to know that we know that this isn't okay and that we are going to have an additional layer of accountability and protection for them. I think people want us to act, and that was the urgency. That is the urgency that I'm hearing from residents.
So let's talk exactly about what you're trying to do. You've asked Detroit to explore legal ways to limit or even ban certain ICE activity, particularly on city property and in sensitive places. So talk about the concrete steps you've taken so far and what questions you're asking city lawyers right now.
I am doing my job in going through this process and the motion so that everyone is very clear about what we can or can't do. Because again, since last year, I've been asked to ban ICE from the city, and I had to turn around and tell residents I can't. That is a federal job that I can't prevent. We're in a different place now. I think we need to ask those questions publicly so that we can all hear and so that we can actually push back and be more creative. Because right now at the Senate level, at the state level, Senator Chang, Mary Kavanaugh, they are proposing Senate Bill 508 that would limit ICE activity in sensitive areas unless they have a warrant. So technically, we are not stopping you, preventing you from doing your job, but we are preventing you from loitering around courts, around churches, places of worship, schools where you don't need to be. Do your job legally, show us the warrant signed by a judge, but you cannot just hang around in unmarked vehicles, causing fear. People are afraid to leave their homes. People are afraid to go to their court cases, that they are going through a legal process to be here. So let us do our job and protect residents. We will let you do your job, show us a warrant. I believe that should be enough for us to be able to say, if we were to, if there was a legal case against us, we are not preventing you from doing your federal immigration. We're just asking you to show us a warrant. We're asking for additional accountability. And this is, I think, one way to protect people.
And someone who is in support of this immigration enforcement might say this is immigration enforcement being strictly and strongly enacted. But I realize that you are framing this as not just immigration policy, but as a public health and safety issue. So from that perspective, what does happen to a city when people are afraid to go to schools, when they're afraid to go to clinics or city offices because federal agents might be there?
Now, suddenly, if you do have a court case, you might not go. You might lose your opportunity to now become a citizen. Our school systems, I hear that attendance has dropped by 50%. in a lot of our schools in District 6 because people are afraid to take their kids to school. I know there are small businesses who have had issues with their employees coming to work because they're scared to go. Or like vecinos who, they're going to work and they get picked up by ICE anyways. And Vecinos is a restaurant in District 6 where, there was recent reports that one of their employees got picked up by ICE as well. This is what happens. Businesses are hurt. Their employees are hurt. Our families are hurt. People don't go to the doctors because they're scared. Or now because what's happening is that the person that could drive, that was going to work, that was leaving the house, that got picked up, that took the risk to do that, has now left their family without a car, without anyone to bring work, money, and to provide for them. That is what's happening.
It's the Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. My guest is Detroit City Council member Gabriela Santiago-Romero. We're talking about immigration enforcement and what Detroit may be facing next. I do want to acknowledge a disparity directly that I've noticed with the killing of Renee Nicole Good. When ICE agents killed Saverio Villegas Gonzalez near Chicago and Keith Porter Jr. in California, there were no statewide lawsuits, no resignations inside the Justice Department, no sustained national attention. What does that tell you about how accountability works depending on who the victim is?
It is such an awful reality that until it happens to you, white America, it's not going to get the attention that it needs. And for me, who is an immigrant that represents a Black and brown community, who knew the dangers from the beginning, but who knew that if I were to move forward and say block ICE, I would have been the one that's gotten attacked. I would have been the radical one. I would have been the one that's putting everybody in danger. And it's just so unfortunate that we wait until these moments, until there is anger from white Americans who are now themselves scared, for them to realize that, if immigrants are in danger, we are all in danger. If they're killing Black men when they're off duty, we are all in danger. It took, and it's heartbreaking and infuriating, for there to be a killing of a white woman, for people to say, okay, it is very clear that none of us are safe.
I'm wondering, as an immigrant raised in Southwest Detroit, how you personally carry that reality, that enforcement violence isn't new, but that recognition and response often depends on race and geography and narrative.
It just reminds me of the importance of organizing and the importance of actually building deep relationships with each other and the importance of real political power coming from the ground up, because we are being othered by both Democrats and Republicans. There's this beautiful quote, right? First they came for, and then they came, I'm forgetting the words right now, but that is so real. And I'm often reminded of that, and I have to sit here and watch them go after one person after the other. And unfortunately, as an organizer, I'm a politician. I'm a politician now, so it's hard to be the organizer that I want to be when people just automatically don't trust me, whatever the case may be. This is the job of organizers, to have the public understand how we're being siloed, to have all of us understand how we have to work together, to say from the very beginning, have white, Black, brown, Native newcomers coming together saying we need to come together and we need to stop ICE from being in our communities. That could have happened a long time ago. I think it's just very clear the work that we have to do as a society to actually bring us together. The circumstances have to be created. And unfortunately, it took this much for people to come together and to actually ask that ICE not be in our communities, when I believe that this should have been asked when we knew that Trump was coming back into office last year.
I do want to think about that, about the fact that Metro Detroit is on the radar of the Trump administration. Before the new year, people got word that ICE is planning to hold 80,000 immigrants in warehouses across 22 cities. Highland Park was on that list. We spoke to Highland Park Mayor Glenda McDonald. Here's what she had to say about the whole thing.
I was very appalled, and also I was a little disturbed that they decided Highland Park would be a place that they would want to place a detention center. I'm not for that type of establishment in our city.
Mayor McDonald, like other mayors, didn't know anything about ICE's plans. The city wasn't contacted by ICE. She learned about this situation from a Washington Post article. She does not want ICE in Highland Park. I'm wondering if you're working with her and other local leaders to prevent ICE from interacting with police agencies in places across Southeast Michigan.
Yes, I think that we should look at zoning. If we can be proactive and zone our cities in a way that prevents detention centers from being in here, that is a way to prevent them. So moving forward, I think there has to be a collective efforts between local, state, and federal governments. I am really, really happy to be working with our mayor, who is willing to have these conversations, to be creative. And I think we have to look at all the things: zoning, ordinances, executive orders, organizing, mutual aid. Because at the end of the day, if Senate Bill 508 doesn't pass, if I'm ultimately told by our lawyers that even if we ask for a warrant, we can't do this, it's too dangerous, because they could say, too, that if we move forward and have these kinds of policies, because they tell me this now, we are risking state or federal funding, which is not what we need either for our city, then I think ultimately people have to realize that it's going to be up to neighbors, up to people coming together and doing migra watches, ICE watches, and being inconvenienced is actually the only way that we're going to be able to protect people. And right now in Detroit, the pushback that I'm getting from the city is that ICE isn't as bad here. It's not Chicago, it's not LA. But in Detroit, people are being taken at 4, 5, 6 in the morning while you're sleeping or while you're at work at 9, 10 in the morning. It's happening quickly, it's happening quietly. So you don't see it in the media, but our residents, our neighbors see it. They see the cars coming in, the unmarked vehicles. They see the doors being smashed in and people being ripped out. And we need people to be on call at 4, 5, 6 in the morning, just like if you were a nurse, to be ready to show up. If we say ICE is in the neighborhood, come out and document and make sure that we are witnessing what's happening. We lack that kind of capacity right now. And I know that we're pushing policies, and I will do that. But there's still this danger and this risk. I'm always told of legalities and consequences. So at the same time, we need to be building capacity to protect people on the ground.
So what I'm hearing from you, Councilmember, is that you're committed to finding creative ways to try and meet this moment, and you're drawing from your roots as a community organizer to coalesce community members and try and protect folks. You've mentioned that immigration enforcement is still happening here, maybe not in the visible ways or at the extreme levels it's happening in Chicago or Minneapolis. I mean, Detroit itself hasn't seen ICE deploy here in large, visible ways. And given what we know about federal detention expansion and enforcement elsewhere, it has me wondering, why do you think Detroit hasn't been targeted in the same way? Although, again, it is still experiencing heightened enforcement.
I think two things. One is that federal agents and ICE have always been in the city. This is nothing new. It's not a shocker. I have seen ICE my whole life in Southwest Detroit. I think that's one. It's not actually a shock. It's nothing new. And if that's part of their strategy, then they are creating chaos and fear in places where this isn't normal. That's one. Two, what I'm being told is that there are good working relationships between our government officials and the White House and local ICE agents. And I'm being told not to rock that boat, not to mess that up. And I understand that. And I take that seriously. And it's my responsibility not to do that. But also, we are not safe. And also, I don't trust, and residents do not trust this federal government and this agency. So we can't just take it for that. I am grateful for that to a certain extent, but it's not enough for me to say that we are safe, that we shouldn't do anything.
When you talk about being cautioned not to rock the boat, this has me thinking about a conversation I had this past summer with Mary Sheffield, and it was when she was running for mayor. And I asked her whether she would work with ICE. Here was part of that conversation. What if a good relationship with Trump means cooperation with him on some of his very aggressive immigration enforcement, which includes, let's say, assisting ICE with deportations and detentions? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, so I do not support using any city funding or support and resources towards assisting the federal government with any ICE operations within the city of Detroit. And working with him to find common ground does not mean compromising any of my values or any of the values of our city here in the city of Detroit. And so I would never compromise what is right just to work with someone. But if there is a way for us to find a common ground to be able to bring funding back to Detroit for some issue, whether it's manufacturing or infrastructure, something that we all can agree on and support in Detroit, I will be definitely advocating for that funding to come back to the city, but not in compromising in any way the values and the safety of the residents here in the city of Detroit.
Okay, so that was back in July. Then candidate for mayor, Mary Sheffield, was saying she wouldn't fund ICE or support ICE. I'm wondering if you've spoken with her now and where the mayor stands on ICE today, if you know.
I think that we are both very cautious about doing things that really do protect our residents and don't cause us to become a target, don't cause us to risk losing funding, which I think is really important. I think it's us being responsible, and it's not a fun thing to do, but it is a big responsibility. And I think this is that middle ground. If we can prevent ICE from sensitive areas, but show us your warrants, we're not preventing you from doing your job. If anything, I'm only doing my job. I'm doing my job in responding to people who are scared right now. Don't be mad at me for doing my job. I'm letting you do yours.
The Metro has reached out to ICE multiple times to ask about its operations in Detroit and Michigan. We haven't heard back yet. We'll let you know when we do. I'm Robyn Vincent. My guest is Detroit City Council member Gabriela Santiago-Romero. We're talking about immigration enforcement and what Detroit may be facing next. After the break, we'll talk about what cities are actually responsible for when federal immigration enforcement shows up and where Detroit may be drawing its lines. Stay with us. Metro on WDET. I'm Robyn Vincent. My guest is Detroit City Council member Gabriela Santiago-Romero. Before the break, we talked about Detroit's political posture on immigration enforcement. Now we turn to the harder question of responsibility and what happens if cities don't act. So, council member, let's say without warning, ICE begins operating more openly in Detroit or nearby cities. What worries you most about how that would affect families, city workers, and trust in local government?
What worries me is that we already see this happening, and residents are already becoming fearful of our own police officers. And when that happens, we actually become more unsafe, because if you're not calling police and there's something happening and they should be there to respond, suddenly no one is responding to the things that are happening. And sorry, I lost my train of thought. So you're asking...
Yeah. What worries you most about the ways that families and different types of folks will be affected if ICE begins operating more openly in Detroit?
So lack of trust in police, period, first. We see them calling less. And then I think just in general, what I'm seeing other cities do and what happens in other places is ICE just ignores local officials. We have seen mayors, council members literally yelling at ICE to leave because they are not responding to their local police. They're telling them they can't be there. So now suddenly you're seeing a lot of local elected officials be on the front lines, be the ones that are telling ICE to leave their neighborhoods.
Yeah. So
it's going to just get more aggressive. People are going to have to get more hands-on. And that to me is actually really wild. This isn't normal. It's not normal to have local officials be arrested for protecting their residents. And this is what's going to happen. More and more of us, residents, citizens, non-citizens, elected officials who do not agree with this agenda are going to be in danger. And that, to me, is not democracy. That is leading through a very, very dangerous path.
I'm wondering your reaction to, you're talking about the Minneapolis mayor telling ICE to get the F out of Minneapolis. That seems to have thrown a lot of fuel onto the fire, and the Trump administration now vows it's going to deploy hundreds more ICE agents into the city. What was your reaction to both the mayor's words and what has come from them?
I think more of us should say that. I think more of us should be speaking out. I think more of us should be saying that we don't want ICE in our communities, because that is literally what our residents are saying. And here's what I think, and I might be wrong, but I want to be hopeful and believe, what if every city, every municipality fought and said no? And what if we made it so hard, because it's happening now, for ICE officers to even do their job? They're having a hard time hiring. People are leaving the job. I think the pressure is important. I think that fear is a strategy and a tactic, and we can fight and we can address fear in its face. It'll be dangerous and there will be risks, but I think that is what we will have to do, because we are now under what seems to be an authoritarian government. That's something that you have to fight, unfortunately.
But is there then a balancing act of the fact that speaking out further can also endanger communities like the one you represent by attracting more attention from ICE and the Trump administration?
Yes, that is the danger. But I think we have to ask ourselves, I always think of things long term. If we're too afraid to act and to move now, we are not going to have the power or the capacity to act when we need to. It'll be too late. The resistance and protesting need to be targeted. They need to be consistent. We need to exhaust the other side, because what they're doing is they're exhausting us, and they're making us tired, and they're making us scared. And when we hide, then we have no power. But if we're out, and if we're chanting, and if we're asking local electeds to speak out, then we put pressure on people that are ICE agents to maybe take a different job. Then we make it harder for them to do their jobs. We have to see what they're doing. They're making it hard for us. We have to make it harder. And I know it's scary. And I think I started this with, we have to be responsible, we have to be tactful. That doesn't mean that we can't be realistic about what's happening here, and that we need to hide, that we need to say, I'm not hiding. I'm saying, show us your warrant. We're just asking for things to be right and to be legal. Why would you deploy 200? That's not okay. And this is where the lawsuits, there are other levers that we have. I think the biggest thing is to move forward, even with the threats and the fear, and be creative.
You're talking about exercising responsibility and tact. I want to contextualize this moment here in Detroit, because Detroit has lived through moments when fear kept people from engaging with public systems. I'm thinking about during times like water shutoffs, during COVID, during earlier policing crackdowns. When you think about immigration enforcement entering everyday spaces, What lessons from those past crises are shaping how you approach this one?
The lesson is that the government is not going to save us. I've seen this over and over and over again, and it's why I'm pushing people to come together to get to know their neighbors, because during COVID, undocumented immigrants at first were not given resources. So while the rest of us were getting these checks, and while many of us were still having our jobs and could still have our jobs, we quickly did our mutual aid effort to give that check up, put it in the funds, so that that fund can go to families that are undocumented that may not be able to receive the money, so that we can help them. That is something that we did outside of this system, but that is something that people did that when they worked together. And that's what I'm asking for is, if we have to work within the system and be tactful, and we can do that, but community, people on the ground must get to know their neighbors, must get engaged, must be ready to take care of each other. Because what's happening, it's not okay. These threats, they're not normal, and we shouldn't accept them. And while you push local officials to be creative, and while we do that, I also think it's really powerful and important when people are working together with us, and when they see ICE agents in the neighborhood and they're asking for the warrants, and the ICE agent says, no, we don't have the warrant. That is evidence, that is data for us that we are in danger. We do not have agents here that are keeping us safe. All of this is important. I think all of it can work together. But this is why you need to engage your local officials. And some places may not be so lucky to have officials that are even willing to have these conversations. But I know in City Council, Councilmember McCampbell is in support of making sure that we find a way to limit ICE. Member Johnson is interested in figuring out how we can do this. We have seen deportations in District 1, District 4, 7, and 6. So this is not just an issue that is important to me or my residents. It's an issue that's important to everyone in Detroit right now. And again, because we've seen Black, white citizens be killed in the hands of ICE. So this is a collective effort.
Councilmember Gabriela Santiago-Romero, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
It's the Metro on WDET. Up next, local political engagement is low, but Michigan municipal officials say democracy is strong in their backyards nonetheless. We'll find out why. Stay with us.